Hi, I'm Jeremiah. I'm back again. But this time, I'm here to give you a tutorial experience. Alright, so, have you ever sat down and gone to create a town, a village, something like that, while running a game? But you don't know where to start? There's so much that you have to tackle. So many little things that you, as the game master, need to worry about. Never fear. I have a checklist that I use every time in my world, and it works like a charm. And I'm going to give these tips to you. Okay. Step 1. You need to work out what kind of town this is going to be. Whether it's going to be run by peasants, run by royalty, governed by a higher power, hungry for money. Or maybe it's just a simple farming village that's run by a few farmers on the side and their families. How is the town governed? How do the people go about their daily lives, and how is it formed? These are things that you need to think of. But keep it short. Don't go too in depth. You don't need an essay to give your players. They won't listen to it all. Trust me, I've tried. Just note yourself down a few small notes, dot points even. 5 is generally enough to give yourself the mental image that you need to be able to pass that on to your players. Step 2. Look at the surrounding area. How will this affect the town? How will this affect the people living in the town and their way of life? In a desert, for example, water would become a very, very important resource. Whereas, say, if you were living near the ocean, fresh water's still good, but it's not going to be as valuable. Are they living near mines? What is their main trade commodity? How do they function, and how do they live off the land? Maybe they hunt for food. Or maybe they've got good farmland, so they just grow their food. These are important things to note. They won't come up all the time, but having these little extra things in there will help your village, town, city come to life. It will make the players realize that this small area is grounded in the world, and that will increase their immersion. Immersion +1. Step 3. What role do you want the town to play? What point do you want it to do? Do you want it to have this epic scene in your story happen there? Or do you simply want it to be a pass-by point? Somewhere that the party arrives on their travel to where the actual story is? Or is it just somewhere off to the side? You just kind of make it to be safe as a fallback. They're important. But regardless of what role you want it to fill, it is key that you build the town around that role. Simply building a town for no reason, it can be a lot more difficult. Simply because you don't have that drive, you don't have the ideas, you can't plant anything to flourish into what you want. Once you know what you want it to do, what role you want it to fill, things will start falling into place. Step 4. Problems. What problems do they face? The village. Everywhere has problems. Whether it be there's a few bears that seem to attack our hunters every time they go out. We haven't been able to hunt very well. Or maybe there isn't too much vegetation around, so it gets very difficult when they're trying to make things. Things like parchment and material. A lot of these things don't simply appear out of thin air, and most villagers can't afford to just buy it from trade. They need to get things from somewhere. And wherever one of those things is, there is bound to be a problem. Now, you want to throw a few of these in there. You don't want to have a place that has no problems. The players will turn up and they'll be like, we're heroes, we're here to fix absolutely nothing. It does not help the adventuring feeling. Now, you could have it so the players bring all their problems here. That is fun, because that way you make the players feel responsible. Whether they actually care or not is a different matter, but responsible nonetheless. And this can cause some very interesting plot points, whether you planned them or not. They'll happen. They will. Step 5. Population. How big is this place? What kind of people is the population? What percentage is rich? Percentage is poor? What percentage is dwarves? And what percentage are gnomes? These are things you need to keep in mind because the population will undoubtedly shape how the village is seen, how your town is built, how it looks, and, most importantly, who the players will be interacting with, the NPCs and their disposition towards the player. If it's a town of orcs, they may be a little more unfriendly to the players. But, who knows, maybe the players have gotten in good with a local warlord, and so they have a bit of a reputation, which, going through a town of orcs, could show fear in the orcs, or even a willingness to follow. And this can develop into some of the best moments you'll ever see, just from something so small. Population. It's important. Another thing about population is how big, how many. Is it 70 bazillion jillion? Or is it 3? You know, a community of 3 people doesn't thrive very well. You got to think of a decent population size, equivalent to the size you want this village, town, city to be. A small village of about 400 people is decent size. That'll give the players something to interact with while they're there. Whereas if you've only got a small village of 3 buildings and 12 people, it's not so much a village as it is a group of houses. It's not a community. It could be. It's not what you're after, unless it's what you're after. In which case, do it. Step 6. Racial disposition. Now, we talked a little bit about this in population, but it's important enough to be a separate topic all on its own, because this can create some great adventures, plots, even just jobs on the job board, things to keep the players busy. You could have a town of, say, we'll go a town of elves for this example, but in power is a human who dislikes elves. How he got to power? I don't know, maybe he cheated his way there, maybe he lied, or maybe he was simply in power before the large amount of elves moved in. Certain villages will obviously have different dispositions between different races. You'll always have that bit of diversity, culturally. And it can be used as a tool to both edge on the players, or to try and calm them. And trust me, that's a tool that's very useful. Step 7. Security. How does the town protect itself? Who does it use, or what does it use? Is it a small hamlet protected by a contingent of honourable knights? Or is it a small group of halflings that have gathered protection from local fae and other animals to help keep their village safe? You can do anything with this. You can even have a defenseless village, at least from the outside. Every place needs some form of security, otherwise it's not going to thrive. You know, with beasts and orcs and demons and all sorts of things potentially roaming the lands, you need to be protected in a society to live there. Otherwise people are just going to move on out. Even if it's just the guards. Have some guards. How do they function? Do they have a guard captain? Are they running groups? Even have outsiders. Have mercenaries hired to do the protecting instead. However you determine the security will impact how the players see the town and how the town functions. Will they simply ignore what protection's there? Or will you make it look imposing enough that they don't want to cross it? Having examples of this is important. So when the players reach the town, have them walk in. Look around, maybe have them greeted by a guard. Have the guard give them, a brief summary and welcome to the town, but then leave them with as long as you don't break any laws, we'll have no problems. Give them a warning. Give them something. Never have the players enter an area where they have no idea what the laws are, unless that is part of your plot, because it can get the players into some sticky situations, and without fair warning, they may not appreciate it. If it's a story point or a plot point, you can always build around that. Just try not to make it the norm. Step 8. Uniqueness. What makes your small village, town, city unique? What makes it it? What makes Breeport Breeport? Well, think about it. What makes it stand apart from the other places in your world or in your game? You don't want to have so many places so similar they just kind of blend together. Give each and every one a feeling. You could have a city that is, while some buildings are on the ground, they've established almost like a scaffolding system, and they've built their city up instead of out. You could have, obvious one here, city and trees. But you could even have things like a city of boats. Have the piers as the streets. Have every building in this city or town as boats. It helps give it a unique feel while still keeping it as a village, city or town, and it functions in that way. But it will help establish what it is in people's minds. The name helps with this as well. Step 9. Points of interest. Where in this town are players going to look? What is going to draw them into these different areas? Is there an altar in town to the gods? Is there a large statue of a hero in the center of town? Is there a very large inn that everyone goes to? Think about this. How many things do you remember from towns that you've been to? Or even in game, when you go to a town, what are the places you look for? What are the places you've seen or been told about that have stood out? Think about that and try and think what sort of emphasis you want the players to have. What emphasis you want to put on this village. Make a few points of interest, and keep in mind, now this is very important because these points of interest will play a big role in what the players remember about the town. They won't remember walking through random streets and seeing some random shop, but they might remember walking down this dull street and on the right, a very large building. But this building isn't made of stone or wood or anything like that. It's made out of leaves, magically enchanted leaves that stick together that let off a delightful fragrance that seems to almost soothe the air it passes through. Have in there, have a store clerk, give him a bit of a personality, something different to the usual, maybe with a nervous twitch, or maybe he simply doesn't like wood or metal. Maybe he's a druid that set up shop but didn't feel right in removing trees to do so, so he took his small amount of leaves every so often and kept them fresh with his druidic magics. And now he uses it to run an alchemy store, or to sell healing salves to those who need it, or maps of the local areas. Things like this can be important. Step 10. Individuals. Who runs this town? Who are they going to run into while in here? These are all the important NPCs that you want to flesh out. The blacksmith, the innkeeper, even the maids at the inn, or the waiters, some guardsmen even. Anyone in the town can be an important NPC if the players want them to. Keep this in mind. You want to give at least a base personality to everyone the players will at least be planned to interact with, and some to those they don't. You may never use this. Don't worry. It's not wasted work. You can always just take those personalities and throw them to someone else later on if the players have bypassed this city and you don't get to use them. You can always do that later. It's never a waste of time. Any time spent preparing is time well spent. Improvising is good, but honestly, improvising an entire town on the go can be difficult, and you may end up with some strange or simply dumb-sounding names. But these NPCs, the important ones, they'll stick in your players' minds as well. And who knows, maybe they'll get deeply involved with them, become good friends, even hirelings that will join them once they leave the town. You never know. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. Step 11. The history. What happened before? How did this village or town get to be what it is today? Who did it? Why did they do it? How did they do it? And where did they come from? What inspirations did this town draw from when it was becoming a town? Did it start off as 2 or 3 people living next to each other and having a rather bountiful selection of nature? Or was it someone's plan? Did they simply want to make a town here as a cover to obscure their arcane dealings underground? Maybe they needed somewhere that people would come to regularly, yet weren't welcome in other towns, so they decided to set up shop here under a separate alias. You can work the history into some plot points, or even have the players encounter someone from the village's history after they've learnt about it, or before, and then later on you introduce them to it, and then they have that moment of realization of, this is this guy, or that was that thing we did, that matches up with... And that point when you get to sit behind the screen and you get to watch their reactions and that realization cross their face. It's amazing. It's totally worth the effort you put in. Trust me. Step 12. Coexistence. How does this village function with the rest of the world? Does it provide trade to someone? Does it provide another town or outpost or even group of bandits with their food source, with their money supply, with their trade? How do they do it? Is it by sea? Is it by land? No town is completely disconnected from the world. However, maybe they were once and aren't anymore. Or maybe it began as a forward settlement, but then they were cut off. So then they had to survive off the land. This would affect the world and other cities. Who sent them? And why haven't they reconnected with them yet? If something was to happen to this village, that town that's getting their iron from them, what would they do? Would there be a weapon shortage? Maybe a quest could come up. Hey, we used to get our fish from these guys. Now we don't get our fish from these guys. Can you guys see what's happening? It opens up so much that you can do. And, as I've said with other things, it helps them feel grounded and connected to the world, so the players feel like it's a functioning world rather than just a name on a bit of paper with some scribbles. And the final 13th step of this list, introducing the town. How you introduce it will heavily, I say this more than anything else, heavily influence how the players see it. If you have this place being attacked by goblins, it's going to show that it's a place that may need the players' help. If they swiftly defend against the golems and slaughter them without the players' help, these guys are pretty capable. We don't have to worry about those. But if they're struggling and these goblins are broken through the gates, the players might think, oh, we need to protect these people. We need to help them overcome this. Or you could have the other thing. The guardsmen. 3 corrupt guardsmen approach the players and attempt to rustle them out of money. They try to propose a toll or a tax for entering when there isn't one. These players are going to be eternally suspect of anyone in power in that town from now on, until you give them evidence, heavy evidence, sometimes even several times afterwards. They're still going to be suspicious and think about it, and that may even impact how they see the surrounding area and the other civilians within this village. It's important because it sets a precedent for how everything beyond the introduction will go. Once it's set, it's hard to change. I hope this helps. I know having a checklist helps me, especially when going over town creation or something large like that. And I hope the information I've given you today helps you, especially in creating more memorable locations and things your players will remember, even you, for quite some time. Who knows? Maybe using these methods, it'll help you to create your own world. Very rewarding. It's a lot of work. If you have any specific questions about the content of this or other videos you would like to see, things you would like help with or suggestions, please drop them below. I'll have a look, I'll see them, and when I get the time, I'll do a video on it. Well, for now, I'll leave you be. I'll be watching the comments. Thanks again. Bye.